Today we're analyzing ancient generals, not by who had the biggest army or most territory, but by who had the strongest command skills, adaptability, and impact on the strategic meta. Some generals were S-tier masterminds who hard-carried their faction. Others, well, they were just walking XP for the next empire. Now, generals don't usually deal direct damage themselves, so we'll need some new stats to analyze. I went and selected the following: command range, strategy, charisma and morale, faction support, and meta relevance. Now that we've got the stat sheet out of the way, let's begin our descent into the tier list with the bottom of the barrel. Crassus came into the late Roman Republic meta with maxed out economic stats but barely specced into military leadership. His wealth passive was S tier, but that didn't translate to the battlefield. His infamous attempt to invade Parthia was essentially a PvP campaign gone horribly wrong, walking his legionaries straight into a wide-open desert map without proper scouting or cavalry support. The result? A brutal loss at Carhae, where he got caught in a classic ranged kite strat by Parthian horse archers. No flanking, no fortifications, no terrain awareness. He not only lost the battle, but also thousands of Roman lives and the eastern momentum of his faction, easily earning him the very first spot on our F tier. In the Greek faction, Nicias played the game like a defensive support player who got promoted to raid leader by accident. He was cautious and almost seemed afraid of a fight. Nothing shows that more than his campaign against Sicily. Despite having a massive fleet and superior Athenian tech, he stalled every opportunity for momentum, gave the enemy time to level up, and when the final push came, his poor coordination led to a complete wipe. His overly passive playstyle might have been viable in a Cold War style meta, but ancient warfare was all about tempo and initiative, and Nicias brought neither. As a Persian general, Darius III inherited one of the largest and richest factions on the server. Despite having numerical superiority, fortified cities, and access to high-tier cavalry and archers, Darius got completely outplayed in every major engagement with Alexander the Great. His morale dropped fast, his coordination was sloppy, and he had a habit of literally running from the battlefield, causing massive debuffs to team morale. Persia's faction was by no means weak in this era, but with Darius at the helm, their powerful army degenerated into useless trash, making him the perfect candidate to close the F tier. Now we get to the D tier. This tier belongs to generals who had potential or decent tools, but either underperformed when it counted or just couldn't keep up with the meta. Varus had access to the Roman Empire's top-tier legionary kit, supply chains, and battle doctrine. By the way, if you want to know if the Roman legionary really was overpowered, check out this video. Varus walked 3 full legions into an ambush in the Teutoburg forest and lost them all. Arminius, a former ally, baited him into forest terrain with no visibility, where Roman formation advantages were negated entirely. Varus failed to scout, failed to adapt, and ignored local intel. His collapse was so devastating that it marked a permanent end to Roman expansion into Germania. One misplay doesn't always ruin a general, but this was one of the costliest wipes in Roman history, definitely impacting the meta. Lucullus had one of the more unique builds in the late Roman Republic meta. He specced into logistics and long-range campaign tactics, and to be fair, he had some strong wins early in his run. But Lucullus's leadership suffered from a crippling flaw. His army didn't want to play with him. Despite winning multiple engagements, his charisma and aura were so low that his troops frequently mutinied or abandoned campaigns entirely. Combine that with a political faction at home that wanted him out of the picture, and he just couldn't stay relevant. And with that, we come to the C tier. This is where we start to see generals who had some strong mechanics, innovative tactics, or solid map control. This guerrilla specialist never commanded a massive army, but his terrain mastery, ambush mechanics, and hit-and-run tactics gave him a consistently favorable matchup against slower Roman formations. However, his leadership suffered the moment he left the forest. He never developed the siege or large-scale coordination tools to scale up his advantage. His downfall came not in battle, but from betrayal during diplomacy. A high-skill rogue-type general, annoying, dangerous, but not top-tier unless left unchecked. But that makes him the perfect C-tier general, great under perfect circumstances, but lacking the adaptability to reach higher tiers. Now we're talking about those who could manage multiple campaigns, hold their own against top-tier builds, and often shape the battlefield meta without quite becoming dominant. Themistocles was the mind behind the Athenian naval boom. His build focused on naval zoning and map control, excelling at choke point abuse and terrain denial. His decision to fight in narrow straits where maneuverability mattered more than numbers turned the tide of the Greco-Persian Wars. However, he fell out of favor politically and was exiled, not because he misplayed, but because his high autonomy playstyle clashed with the faction's leaders back in Athens. Strategically smart and innovative, but fragile when it came to diplomacy and team cohesion. The legendary Spartan general Leonidas isn't in B tier for win-loss ratio, but for impact and mechanical skill ceiling. His playstyle was an all-in defensive stand, fortifying a choke point with minimal resources and forcing an enemy Zerg into a costly bottleneck. His leadership and morale were so powerful that a comparably small Spartan-led force held off the largest army in the world for 3 days, causing massive time loss and psychological tilt in the Persian camp. He didn't win the battle and died, but considering that it was impossible to win in the first place, he did quite a good job. Honestly, you could even put him in A tier, but I settled for B tier because his tactics mostly work in a defensive situation and not a prolonged military campaign. Pyrrhus had strong unit diversity, elite units, and early access to war elephants. He scored impressive wins against Rome and Carthage alike, but at an absurd cost. His tactics prioritized short-term victories without accounting for resource drain or troop retention, resulting in the infamous Pyrrhic victory term. If there had been a proper supply chain mechanic in the game, he might have cracked A tier. Instead, every win bled him dry until he had nothing left to leverage. Now we're getting into generals whose every battle shifted the balance of power. These were the minds that redefined tactics, implemented game-breaking mechanics, or simply won incredibly consistently. Belisarius played in the post-meta collapse period of the Roman Empire, where the old mechanics had been nerfed, half the map was overrun with barbarian builds, and the devs hadn't updated the tech tree in centuries. Despite this, Belisarius wrung near top-tier performance from a mid-tier faction. Using smaller forces, deception, and diplomatic baiting, he repeatedly outplayed larger armies across Italy, North Africa, and the Near East. And his adaptability across urban and open terrain maps made him one of the most versatile generals in late antiquity. His only real weakness? An emperor named Justinian, who kept firing him mid-campaign for political reasons. With a stronger support faction, he might have become an S-tier general. Epaminondas was the guy who finally cracked the Spartan matchup. At Leuctra, he used a revolutionary formation, the oblique phalanx, stacking one flank to overwhelm the Spartan elite while delaying with minimal forces elsewhere. This flipped the Spartan front line, traditionally considered unbreakable, and caused a full collapse of their meta dominance. Epaminondas then carried Thebes into a short-lived period as the top-tier Greek faction. After a few years at the top, Thebes couldn't sustain its dominance, but Epaminondas proved that clever positioning and force concentration could beat brute strength. Cyrus didn't just win battles, he built one of the largest empires in the game from scratch. His real strength wasn't just battlefield tactics, though he had those too. It was his ability to absorb factions into his empire without destabilizing them. He didn't wipe enemy builds, he recruited them. His mix of diplomatic charisma, fair governance, and quick strike military precision made him nearly impossible to counter. So why didn't he make it into the S tier? His battlefield record, while strong, doesn't include many dominant engagements with lasting impact. But in terms of game-changing presence, Cyrus was bordering the highest tier for sure. Now we're getting to the top of the list, These generals pushed the boundaries of logistics, tactics, morale, and political timing, but more importantly, every one of them left behind a legacy that echoed across centuries of warfare. When Caesar was born, Rome wasn't the powerhouse we all know, but he changed that. While many generals specialize in one domain, tactics, politics, logistics, Caesar mastered all of them simultaneously. In the Gallic Wars, he took legions that were initially seen as a backwater expeditionary force and transformed them into the most experienced, loyal, and tactically flexible army in the Western world. His engineering game was top tier, building bridges across rivers in days, constructing double-walled siege encirclements, and leveraging local terrain against the native armies who thought they had a home advantage. But Caesar's most dangerous weapon? Narrative control. He turned every campaign into a public spectacle, keeping Roman morale high and political enemies off balance with dispatches crafted to sell himself as the inevitable victor. His only mistake was to develop a slight god complex, which in the end lost him his faction support and led to his murder. Hannibal's campaign in Italy wasn't just impressive, it was impossible, and he did it anyway. He started his run by crossing the Alps with war elephants, multiple factions worth of mercenaries, and a laughably small number of resources. He lost over half his force doing it, and still showed up in enemy territory with enough strength to win multiple battles against Rome on their home turf. At the Battle of Cannae, he baited Rome's larger force into overextending, then executed a double envelopment so precise it's still studied today in military academies. However, what kept Hannibal from winning the game and becoming the leader of the meta was his faction. Carthage refused to send reinforcements, and his siege toolkit was underdeveloped. Hannibal was forced to be a roaming boss, meant to keep Rome bleeding until someone back home pressed the win button, but that never came, making him the ultimate high-skill, low-resource general. He inherited a decently strong faction with a well-oiled army and instantly took it from regional relevance to total global domination in under 15 years. He beat Persia, steamrolled through Anatolia, crushed the Levant, conquered Egypt, and then kept going just to see what was left. Alexander combined unmatched battlefield charisma with tactical flexibility, flawless logistics, and psychological warfare. His companion cavalry functioned like a high-speed scalpel, while his phalanxes formed the backbone of an army. At Issus and Gaugamela, he beat Darius III, who had a massive numerical advantage. His flanking attacks were so quick and accurate, it often looked like his enemies weren't even on the same patch. And unlike many conquerors, Alexander wasn't just a destroyer. He brought local elites into his command structure, and even tried to normalize inter-faction marriages for diplomacy buffs. His one flaw? Overreach. He pushed past the exhaustion point of even his most loyal units and left behind a fragmented empire. But make no mistake, in a pure general versus general ladder, Alexander is the final boss. And there it is, the ancient general tier list, from Crassus to Caesar, from failed flankers to flawless tacticians. Some generals won a single fight and coasted on it forever. Others reshaped continents, rewrote doctrines, and bent the map to their will. If you want a tier list for medieval commanders, ancient warrior classes, or anything else, let me know in the comments below.